Makayla. Makayla was on closing shift. Again. It's not like the convenience store was open super late. She was allowed to lock the door at 10. But somehow she always got stuck with the late shift. Mr. Patel, the owner of the store, had mentioned from time to time that he'd like to stay open all night, but Makayla knew that his chances of being able to do that weren't great. This was a seriously sketchy neighborhood, and finding workers willing to work overnight would be close to impossible. Nonetheless, even though there probably wouldn't be enough late-night business to justify staying open, just the thought that he might be leaving money on the table made Mr. Patel sweat visibly. He'd asked Makayla if she'd be interested in working an overnight shift if he made the change. He'd even offered to bump her hourly a whole $1 if she would, but she got creeped out closing at 10 as it was. Never mind staying there all night alone. She was too scared to walk to her car, so on the nights that she worked closing, she had her cousin Malik swing by and pick her up. She paid him off in Takis and the leftover rotisserie chicken strips that she was supposed to throw into the dumpster. Another place that she was too scared to go by herself. Tonight, a customer walked through the door at 9:55, because of course she did. She walked right over the floor that Makayla had just mopped. Well, at least Makayla hadn't zeroed out the register yet. The woman seemed to know exactly what she wanted. She got a pint of ice cream, a bottle of cold duck, and a mixed martial arts magazine. She was beautiful, tall, almost willowy, with jet black hair and impossibly long legs. Makayla, who had always considered herself straight, found herself questioning that assessment. And then she looked the woman in the face. There was something weird about her eyes. She had square irises, like a goat. Makayla's Uncle Charlie had taken her to a petting zoo once when she was young. Charlie was her mom's black sheep older brother, and she didn't see much of him, but the trip to the petting zoo was one of her favorite memories. What she remembered most at the moment was that the goat that had eaten the hem of her jacket that day had eyes like this woman. And she also had whiskers. Not a beard like her Aunt Bunny, but cat-like whiskers that sprouted from around her perfect nose and twitched as she smiled at Makayla. Makayla rang up the woman's purchases, but before she could tell her what she owed, the beautiful woman dropped a couple of heavy coins into Makayla's surprised hands. She gave her a quick wink, turned, and walked out the door with a sway to her hips that Makayla envied so very much. She stared after the woman for a moment or two, and then looked at the coins in her hand. She didn't have much experience in such things, but they appeared to be solid gold. Makayla bit one of the coins, something she'd seen in a movie once, and her teeth left a mark. After a moment's thought, she decided to pay for the customer's purchase out of her own pocket. On nights when she wasn't working at the convenience store, Makayla hustled overconfident white men at an axe-throwing bar. She was 23, but looked about 16, and heavily bearded hipsters who were down a couple of beers took great, if slightly creepy, pleasure in teaching the pretty black girl how to throw an axe. One thing led to another, and they usually ended up losing money to her. So Makayla had about $50 in her pocket. She hadn't had a chance to put the cash into her European trip envelope yet. She didn't know much about these coins, but she figured that they had to be worth more than the $34.50 that Superwoman's stuff had cost. She took a picture of the shiny coins on her phone and then did a quick image search. Almost instantly, a bunch of matching pictures came up, though of much older, tarnished coins. According to the websites attached to the images, these were doubloons. As in pirates, yar, 15 men on a dead man's chest. No kidding, doubloons. Just then, Malik came in and asked what was taking her so long, so she shoved the coins in her pocket, closed out the register, set the alarm, and left, locking the door behind her. Malik asked where his snacks were, so she unlocked the door, sprinted behind the counter, and grabbed Malik's doggy bag and got back out the door before the alarm went off. Malik smiled triumphantly, and they drove home. Makayla didn't have much experience in cashing in 17th century currency. Who does, after all? But she was pretty sure that she needed to keep the details of how she came into possession of these quiet. She wasn't sure how to get the most bang for her buck for them, so to speak, but from growing up in the neighborhood she knew that there were a number of people who could take valuables of, let's say, uncertain provenance off her hands. Shady Jerry didn't blink when Makayla showed him the coins, but then again he probably wouldn't have displayed any emotion if someone set his mother on fire. He told Makayla that moving antique coins such as these could be problematic due to some inconvenient historic preservation laws, so the best he could do was 75% of their value as gold. Makayla knew perfectly well that Jerry was ripping her off, which was confirmed by subsequent research into the currency price for the gold. But even so, her pocket was $3,000 heavier than it had been the day before, which she wasn't going to complain about. A couple of nights later, when Makayla was on closing duty again, she made sure to have $100 in small bills from her doubloon money on her, just in case. When 10 o'clock rolled around, she waited for an extra half hour before closing out the register. But nobody unusual came into the store. A couple of cops noticed that the lights were on after closing and came in to check on her, which was sweet. They both bought donuts. The next night, however, a man in a long gray coat came in at 9:55 on the dot. He bought a box of Twinkies and a bottle of drain cleaner, which he paid for with a large root that looked like some sort of ginger. His skin was pale blue, and he had far too many fingers on his right hand. Makayla accepted the root with a smile, which the man returned, showing small cat-like fangs. He nodded, turned, and disappeared through the door into the night. A little research revealed that the root was actually a very rare type of ginseng, which she sold to a Chinese herbalist for a gratifying return on her investment of $11. A few nights later, a short, gnarled man with an enormous nose bought a case of Red Bull with a small spiraled piece of what looked like ivory. Her new friend, Mr. Kwok, was so excited when she handed it to him the next day that Makayla was worried about his blood pressure. Interestingly enough, that same night, an honest-to-goodness unicorn clopped into the store and gestured to a bag of Sun Chips and a quart of orange juice with its horn, which Makayla couldn't help noticing was missing its tip. She bagged the unicorn's items and then looped the handles of the plastic bag over its chipped horn, which it paid for by swishing its tail vigorously until several hairs broke loose and fluttered to the floor. This time Mr. Kwok had to sit down with his head between his legs before he could buy the hairs from Makayla. By now, Makayla was starting to accept the strange turns her life was taking, and had taken to staying at the store until well after midnight each time she was working closing. Mr. Patel had to have noticed from the register receipts that she was working extra hours off the books, but he didn't say anything to her about it. On the one hand, he didn't pay her for the extra hours, but on the other, he didn't ask her any awkward questions. After a few months of serving mysterious supernatural customers, Makayla asked Mr. Patel for a meeting, and offered to take over the graveyard shift if he wanted to keep the store open 24 hours. She was willing to work overnight 5 nights a week. If he wanted to close down early 2 nights a week, she was willing to cover the overnight shifts. If he wanted to go 24/7, Malik, who had seen how much extra money his cousin was bringing home, was willing to cover 2 or 3 late-night shifts a week. To keep Mr. Patel from getting too suspicious, she told him that she'd want twice her current salary. He pretended to reluctantly think it over, but there was never any doubt that he'd go for it. Admittedly, Malik was a little freaked out when he shadowed Makayla for a couple of nights, but the clink of silver coins in his hand did a lot to broaden his worldview. For the next year, the cousins waited on a nearly constant parade of dryads, elves, Japanese fox spirits, and creatures that defied classification. As word got out among Makayla's new customer base, her mysterious late-night visitors went from 3 or 4 a week to a dozen or more each night. After 9 or 10 months of building her clientele and making business contacts who would discreetly buy, rent, or license the payments Makayla received nightly, she was in a position to buy Mr. Patel out and take over the store on her own. Knowing which side his bread was buttered on, as Makayla's grandfather would have said, Patel accepted her purchase offer, paid cash on the barrelhead with conveniently untraceable gold bars, without complaint or questions. Which is how an apparently unnamed convenience store, open only from sunset to dawn each day, became an institution in the worst neighborhood in Cleveland. Nobody but the police seemed to notice the late-night crime rate in the neighborhood had dropped to almost nothing, but patrol officers quickly became loyal late-night customers who would smile and nod to their mysterious fellow patrons. After a few months, a neighborhood after-school program and the local soup kitchen began receiving generous anonymous donations each month. A pilot program was quickly started to provide overnight child and elder care for third-shift job holders and sex workers. Drug dealers were motivated to move their business elsewhere by some extremely persuasive men and women in trench coats with glowing eyes. In time, all 6 of Makayla's children attended Ivy League colleges. This is something called a bodega sunset. Okay, we're going to start, as usual, with some ice and a little bit of botanical gin. This is Hendrick's Oasium, which is a desert-themed gin. It's faintly sweet, tastes a little bit of dates, I think, maybe some cumin. Anyway, 2 ounces of that. And yeah, let's put that away so we don't knock it over. Okay. Now, fresh squeezed lemon juice. There's no substitute. But here's a little trick I've found. At the grocery store, I don't buy my lemons in the produce aisle. I buy them from the end cap on the seafood section. They tend to be fresher. They tend to be just juicier, better lemons. I think the seafood guys, yeah, let's just drop that in. I think the seafood guys get there early in the morning and pick the best lemons, but that's just my theory. Anyway, so there's a full ounce of fresh squeezed lemon juice. All right. And this is something called pamplemousse. It is a grapefruit liqueur. Let's go with half an ounce of that. That's just to give it a little bit more tartness, a little bit, this is going to play with the lemon juice and sort of mellow it out. And then for a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of color, we're going to add a half an ounce of grenadine. Now, grenadine is pomegranate syrup. And so, again, you've got that tartness in the background, but it is sweet and it is bright red. So that's going to give us a nice rosy color. Okay, we're going to seat the shaker. This type of shaker is called a Boston shaker. Most bartenders prefer this type of shaker. I think, they could tell you all different reasons, but I think it's because it just looks really cool. And it's easier to strain. You can control what's coming out. Okay, now look at that color. Really beautiful orangey rose color. And the last element to this drink is what we call a slip of blue curacao. All that means is that we're pouring it down the side of the glass, and because the blue curacao, it's brightly colored, and it's heavier, it's denser than the cocktail, it's going to sink down to the bottom. So let's take a look. Yeah, and a taste. Oh yeah, that's pretty good. That's light and fruity and tart and a little bit mysterious. I think that's a winner.